Hello and welcome along to another managerial special from the Honest Football Podcast. We are back with another one of our festive specials because the manager merry-go-round is very much on the move at the moment, and this time it's Grimsby Town in League Two. Of course, Ian Holloway left last week under a bit of a cloud off the pitch, but also with poor results and performances on it. And former club hero Paul Hurst is back after guiding them to the Football League in 2016, and he's got his long-term assistant Chris Doig with him as well. So I'm sure Grimsby fans are excited by that. There's a takeover going through at the moment as well. But Charlie, we always talk about the outgoing manager first. Ian Holloway, he's got a reputation, he's got a name, and he's become quite popular for the way he's talked since the pandemic about the football situation in the EFL. But results weren't great. There was a cloud off the pitch. He talked about inappropriate conversations with the consortium. It didn't look like it was ever going to end well, did it?
No, if I'm honest. I mean, I suppose you've got to judge him by the numbers and the results haven't gone at all well for him. 11 wins in 38, lost 18 of those. In any stretch, any league, you're going to struggle with that. But I don't like using it, but someone of his experience and his calibre, I think people really just expected a bit more from Grimsby. I mean, he's been there a year. I know it's tough to the conditions and talk about recruitment, but you'd like to think that he would have carried them up a little bit higher than what he has done. So, there's been some results, I'm sure we'll talk about them in a minute, that maybe have not gone their way. But off the pitch, it certainly isn't working. But more importantly, for him on the pitch, it's not in a disrespectful way. When you've got someone like him in the club and they're losing as often as they are, it's a no-brainer, really, which is a bit of a shame, because I do like Ian Holloway as a character. But when it doesn't work for him, it doesn't work for him at all well. When it goes great, he looks at QPR and places like that. Spoke to Richard Paquette before a few years ago. When it doesn't work, he does implode quite a lot, and that's unfortunately what's happened to Grimsby here.
Yeah, and it is a shame because, as you say, at first when he came in partway through last year, he galvanised them, he helped them out of a difficult position again. But since the summer, obviously a lot of clubs in League One and League Two have had problems with budgets, with the salary cap, but also with the fact that football is in a dire state financially as well in the lower levels. But this season, we talk about off-the-pitch matters, but on it hasn't been great either. The results are poor. Some of the beatings have been quite convincing. They've got the second worst goal difference in the league. They've got the worst goal difference at home and the third worst home record. So, I mean, taking aside all of the stuff with the takeover and the conversations for the reasons that he's left, on the pitch, it was probably going to end in disaster as well.
Yeah, and I think there's particular results. They lost to Southend. That's a team that's around them. They drew with Mansfield, which is probably one of the highlights of the last 10 games, which really is, Mansfield are just above them. Got thumped by Tranmere 5-0 when Tranmere weren't in great form. I think just before Keithfield took over. So it's just not, the results on the pitch haven't been looking great at all. And I think once you lost the teams around him like Southend recently, that was it. He was always in a spot of bother.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we will come to Paul Hurst, the new man, in a minute, but we have got to talk about Ian Holloway's comments after leaving, which were that the prospective owners, the consortium that were looking to take over, were contacting him directly, and he described some of the conversations or attempts as inappropriate, which I know a lot of Grimsby fans are excited because obviously the owners that are there, they don't feel are backing the club, are supporting the club, and this is potentially a light at the end of the tunnel. But as a fan of a club that's sustainable now and has been in administration multiple times ourselves in Luton, you've got to be a little bit worried when those sort of things are coming out from a manager that's basically seen it all. Yeah,
you know what it is? For me, it's professionalism. And if that's their approach before they've even taken over the club, what sort of leadership are you then going to have in the club? So for me, I agree with what you're saying. And how many times have we seen this, particularly in the EFL, where a new owner comes in and there's all of the hype and the sense of everyone, a hope and expectation. Sadly, for quite a number of clubs, it hasn't ended well. So for me, that would concern me, the lack of professionalism in that. And what I would say, I know that people talk about Ian Holloway's character and stuff like that, but he's got no reason to make this up. There's no advantage to him in spreading this unless it's true. Do you know what I mean? So there has to be mileage in what he's saying. And if that is true, which by the sounds of it is, then I would be a bit worried as a neutral in terms of being, what the potential takeover of Grimsby, because that kind of leadership is not what you want in a time where you're struggling for money and struggling, really, let's be honest, for form on the football pitch.
But let's move on to the new man. He's the man who deserves a lot of the attention, and it's not a completely new man for Grimsby, because as we mentioned, Paul Hurst in 2011 took over as a joint manager alongside Rob Scott, 132 games experience there. And then on solo charge for 3 years, took them up to the Football League, as we mentioned, but also had a win rate of 49.5%, which I'm sure Grimsby will be taking now for the rest of the season if they can get it. But he signed a long-term deal. He's here till the summer of 2023, so a 2.5-year contract. I guess initially, just your reaction to that. Do you feel it's a good appointment, going back for the second time to the same manager?
We've been quite vocal about that. Yeah, yes. I can't see why. It's a bit of a... it's the only way is up with him in that sense, really. He knows the club, he knows the league. And what I would say is, I know he did well at Grimsby, but he also had a really good time at Shrewsbury after that, and so that for me shows that he's a sustainable in what he does. It's not a flash in the pan, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah.
They are going to need someone who is going to galvanise the fans and the players, and I suppose he's the man. There's not many other people out there at the minute who are either unemployed or available anyway. And I'm not saying that's why they've gone for him, but of who's left, he was a bit of a no-brainer, really. So for me, definitely probably the best shout they could go with. He's had a year out, so hopefully you'd like to think maybe a bit more refreshed, not had to try and work for a pandemic and all that kind of stuff. So I think really the only way is, we'll get on to the question later on, I think it's probably the best move they could have done, which is hopefully good for the leadership of the club, but we spoke about earlier, whether that's going to be a long-term solution or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the one thing I would say is obviously you mentioned the stint at Shrewsbury, which was very good. I know it obviously unfortunately went a bit wrong when he left for Ipswich and then had a so-so spell at Scunthorpe afterwards, but in the majority of his career, he's done a very good job, including Grimsby. So there's plenty of good experience there. We obviously talked to Gregor Robertson ourselves, who got promoted via the playoffs with Grimsby under his leadership, who spoke very highly of his management. So there are some positive signs there. But of course, as we mentioned on the pitch, his first thing has got to be to address the goals conceded column and the home form, hasn't it?
Yeah, and that's we say that about a lot of managers when they come in, but particularly the situation Grimsby are in. And the reason I say that is at the time of recording, Stevenage picked up an unlikely win at the weekend. Teams around them are going to start picking up results. So he's got a lot of work to do. He's not got a lot of time to do it, really, because you don't want to be starting getting cut adrift from the rest of the league. So in that sense, the first thing has to be, more so than any other manager special done, has to be addressing that at the back. And hopefully that gives you, like we said before, the foundation to build on from there. And it breeds confidence. Even where we play football in Sunday League, if you've got a good back four, which you were part of, obviously, Dan, it breeds confidence for the rest of the team. You play with a bit more freedom, you play with a bit more enthusiasm, and, hopefully that leads to better results. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's something he worked on in his first spell originally, and I'm sure will be the same again. I guess the positive, I know we've talked about the possible concerns with the new consortium, is that the positives in the statement announcing him is that it looks like they've been very involved in that recruitment process. They're aware that he wants to sign players in January, and they've sort of seemed to have been quite prepared for the window. So the fact that they're going to be coming in time, hopefully for part of or all of the January window, he's going to have the chance to bring in his own signings. Recruitment has often been criticised in the summer at Grimsby this year. Hopefully, you're going to see a little bit of a turnover. And if so, they should then be able to climb up the table, because they're already 3 points clear of the bottom two. And there's only, 10 points between them and 10th place. So can you see them climbing, I guess?
Yeah, I think so. I think, like you say, I think doing it now is definitely the right time to do it. I think, like you say, you mentioned, if this leadership, the lack of professionalism would worry me a bit. However, like you just said, they clearly have got a vision for the club. And I think if they can impart that really quickly in January, then, I don't see any problems with it. I think they'll be safe. I think, as much as I mentioned this before, I think there's teams around them, sadly, who are probably in less form and have less resources and maybe a less of a chance for staying up because of that reason, despite picking up results recently. So I think they'll be all right. I think he'll really come into his own over the summer. I think they'll have enough from what we just spoke about in January, maybe bring in one or two lads at the back just to shore it up and pick up enough draws even. Enough draws could keep you up in League Two at the minute, So just to be a bit more sturdy. So yeah, I think they'll stay up, but I don't think it will be an amazing season for Grimsby, regardless, even with Paul Hurst coming in. I don't think it's going to be suddenly a playoff shout. But yeah, as a Grimsby fan, I'm sure he'd take that in a minute. But the summer, I think, is where he'll do his best work.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have to talk about something you mentioned there, which was a playoff shout that isn't possible, because our dear colleague, who's not with us at the moment, Craig Savage, predicted them to finish in the playoffs. Now, we obviously don't think that they're going to finish there now. And to be fair, he has said now that he thinks they'll stay up, but they won't be in the playoffs. But I think the final paragraph of the statement announcing Paul Hurst was that it's been a very divisive week for the club, and they hope that they can pull together and support him. Now, if that happens, you said you think they'll be safe, but looking ahead to the rest of the season, whereabouts do you think they're going to finish?
See, it's tough. The problem is League Two is I mentioned this in one we did recently, everyone's beating each other around them. As I say, Cambridge were up outside the playoffs, and then they lost to Stevenage the other day. So, and I don't think pre-season anyone had Cambridge anywhere near there as an example. So, not saying it's the luck of the draw, but then, Bolton, really, I'm looking at them, they should be higher than where they are. So, I would say around that mark. So I think a few teams around them will pull away now. I think, especially over January, some of the bigger clubs might bring a few recruit quite well. So I would say 12th downwards. I can't see getting any harder than 12th, to be honest with Colchester. I was at 29 points. So I know that obviously we're still early this season. They're 9 points off of that. I think that if he's clever enough, he'll play for a few draws and slowly work the way up. But I'm bottom half of the table, but I don't think he'll get relegated. I don't think he'll be near that, to be honest.
No, that's fair. I guess the good news is for Grimsby fans, we have predicted them to stay up unanimously across the board, even including Craig, who's not here today. Thank you to Charlie for joining me as always. If you do enjoy the episode, please put a thumbs up on it. Of course, let us know down in the comments what you think of Paul Hurst coming back, what you think of the potential takeover, and of course, some of the off-the-field comments involving Ian Holloway just before and just after he left. We're interested to know your thoughts. Where do you think you'll finish this season? And are you looking forward to the January window? Because it looks like it's going to be a bit of fun. If you haven't already, please do subscribe down below. We've got all of those podcast specials in the eye above, as we mentioned. Of course, the interview with Gregor Robertson's there, and there's plenty of other content, including matchday championship predictions, interviews with pros, and much, much more. You can follow us over on Twitter @HonestFootball3, and we'll see you next time.